don't listen to the Venezuelan shoeshine boy. Today we discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
If you work in finance, in investing, you have this particular background, you already know this story. In case you haven't heard the story, well, I'm going to repeat it for you today. In 1921, we had a collapse of the stock market and the economy overall in the United States. That was a very historical event, one of the worst collapses of economic collapses in history, in recorded history, actually. And afterwards, we had what is known in the US as the 1930s depression. Anyways, but during the 1920s, the US was a party. You had the Great Gatsby and that kind of stuff. I mean, it was a party. I mean, the 1920s, the Roaring 20s, as it was known back then, that particular period of time. Well, anyways, what happened in this particular story comes from Joseph Kennedy. Joseph Kennedy is the father of JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, that became U.S. president, that got shot by Harvey Lee Oswald. Well, I'm not going to get in the Kennedy story. Well, anyways, we had Joseph Kennedy, that he was an analyst, an investor. He worked on Wall Street, basically. And he was a fairly rich man back then. And he lived in New York, of course. And he had, like most of these guys, of the Wall Street guys over there, and back then, the people, remember how people dress in the 20s? The suit, the tie, and they had these leather shoes. So he had the habit of getting his shoes, his black leather shoes, being shined by, a kid, usually on the streets, a shoeshine boy. So that was a routine, just sitting down, reading the newspaper. Meanwhile, a kid was shining your shoes. Well, what happened is that just a couple of months before the 1921 collapse of the stock market, a particular shoeshine boy was cleaning Joseph Kennedy's shoes, and he was talking about the stock market and investing, and which were the better companies and the better stocks and so on. So basically, that was a concern for Joseph Kennedy. He quickly paid the shoeshine boy, went straight up to the investment bank or the place where he placed his positions in the market, and he sold every position in the market that he had and converted to cash, of course. And then he shorted the market. He put options on the market, and apparently, just of course, a couple of months later, the market completely got wiped out, and he actually became richer. Back then, he created generational wealth. And similar stories have been, going around throughout the decades. For instance, with John D. Rockefeller, that he mentioned, I believe, that when I have to track this particular source, but Rockefeller, apparently, he had a chauffeur, a personal driver. Of course, he was filthy rich. And when his particular driver started talking about investing on the stock market, anything like that, every time that he heard his particular driver talking about it, he quickly, same thing, liquidate his positions and stay away from the market for a while. Now, more recently, we have other stories. The dot-com bubble, in case you don't know, in the 1990s, we had, of course, on the NASDAQ, a huge financial bubble regarding the dot-com companies, Amazon.com, Pets.com, everything.com. Very good. So it was a lot of FOMO in the market, and many people that they had no position of being in the market and investing, that kind of thing. So everyone became an investor back then in the 90s. And even the cab drivers were talking about, this particular stock.com. And when, the smart money, what is known in Wall Street, in finance, the smart money start listening to the average people talk about certain investments. That's when it was right out a call, an indicator that they have to leave the market, just liquidate their positions and leave the market rest for a while. Now in Venezuela, we are not on that particular position. Actually, we are on the opposite position. The shoeshine boy, the driver, the taxi driver are saying quite the opposite. So remember, if you are in finance, if you are in investing, you know the smart money has to do quite the opposite as the dumb money says. And by the way, please, I have to say, give the disclaimer, this is not investing advice, and I'm not saying go rush into the Venezuelan stock market, start investing like that. No, it's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is have critical thinking skills. If you're listening this from abroad, especially from a Western nation, most likely you already know a Venezuelan, one or two, and probably you have a bunch of Venezuelan friends. And very good for you. I mean, Venezuelans are cool people. And if you know a Venezuelan in your particular home country, most likely this person is a very well-educated Venezuelan, is a very hard-working Venezuelan, that most likely on 99% of cases, Venezuelan migrants are economic migrants, are people that migrated looking for better financial opportunities, job opportunities. Right now, Venezuela is a net human capital exporter. Now, the issue is that Venezuelans abroad, over 90% of them, they are going to tell you only bad things about Venezuela. And of course, you can understand why, so it's perfectly reasonable. But remember, their particular point of view is not the same as you. If you are an investor, if you work in finance, if you are an entrepreneur, and so on, because they have a totally different mindset. And actually, that will be a bullish indicator if you know this particular paradigm between smart money and dumb money. And sorry, it is what it is. In this particular case, the Venezuelans are the dumb money. The bottom line is that if you have any particular opinion or any particular hypothesis about Venezuela, what I recommend is to do your research with critical thinking abilities. Take, of course, listen what other Venezuelans tell you, especially the Venezuelans living in your home country. But most likely you have to see beyond that, because here's the funny thing. Venezuela, and I mentioned this a lot of times, there is a lot of inequality in Venezuela. Always has been unequal in Venezuela. And right now is very, very, very unequal, one of the most unequal nations in the world. What happens is that the reality of Venezuela is going to change depending on the particular cohort that you are dealing with on the first place. Making ends meet in Venezuela is difficult for most Venezuelans, and it's not their fault, of course. There are socio-economic things going on. Also, since we had a recovery, quote unquote, in Venezuela of GDP, has been like 25%, 25-30%. And what happened is this particular recovery is a K-shaped recovery. So every advice that a Venezuelan is going to give you is going to come from their particular perspective, their particular socio-economic perspective. And if it's not that what you're looking for regarding their particular socioeconomics, their advice is not going to be helpful in many cases. And the last thing I want to add, this is a funny thing, this is something that I don't know why I catch up this particular thing, this particular dichotomy very late, is that you know that there are cities, usually big cities, all over the world, like New York, Paris, Berlin, places like that. Those cities have, since usually they are big cities, what happens is usually those cities are expensive. And those cities also living, making ends meet on those cities is very difficult. So the people that live on those particular cities, what they found out is they always hate that particular city. People from New York, I'm not saying, by the way, if you're a New Yorker, I know that you love New York and the Yankees and nothing against New York. I love New York, by the way. I have the t-shirt over there that I love New York. But the point is that those cities become unbearable for people that are barely making it on those cities. Meanwhile, those particular places usually are very cool, very fun, And you can get a lot. I mean, there are very special places when you reach certain financial status. Talking cities like, of course, New York, LA, London, places like that. And those cities, of course, if you reach certain threshold, you're gonna go to a cool parties, good networking. You're gonna see a bunch of special things. If you're a man, you're gonna meet supermodels, and also if you're a female, you're gonna meet very eligible bachelors, things like that, with cool events and cool things going on. But you need to reach certain stratas in order to actually see that particular. I mean, it's like in the movie Constantine that they talk about. I'm talking the movie, not the series of Netflix they do afterwards that I didn't watch. Talking the movie with Keanu Reeves. Well, they were speaking about, because in case you haven't watched this battle between good versus evil, and heaven and hell. And what happens is that they explain that both heaven and hell are both in the earth, but on a different reality. Same thing happens with these particular big cities, New York, LA, London. Those cities are unbearable if you are making ends meet, barely, but if you are in a certain position, it's gonna be an awful place to be. That, I mean, it's awful, doing the commuting and groceries and paying bills is gonna be more difficult. Well, Venezuela works exactly like that. And Venezuela is very cool when you reach that particular threshold. But before that, it is unbearable, actually, and that's one of the reasons why we have many migrants and also many people struggling within the country. So the main takeaway here is, don't listen to the shoeshine boy, because they're gonna give you inaccurate information. It looks accurate. I mean, they're not doing it because they're bad people. They're doing it because it's their perspective. They are not on a particular level, and that's why they're giving, because it's their reality, and it's frustrating. And I have empathy for these particular people, because I live it myself. I was the shoeshine boy at some point myself. But they're not going to be very inaccurate information, and it's not going to help you on the long terms. This applies not only for Venezuela, but actually for the rest of the world.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, venezuelainsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.